in these private equity firms, there has to be a ton of trust here. Because from my perspective, and again, I focus on, passive investing, that kind of thing. You're really committing yourself, like you mentioned earlier. And I'm just curious, the likelihood of success there, it has to vary just as any investment, right? I mean,
Yes.
the reason you invest in a company, stocks is you expect a return, but then there's the risk, there's always risk involved, right? So
Indeed.
it seems almost that commitment and the level of risk seems a little amplified when you're heading into this private equity. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's very fair to say. I mean, just overall in the finance industry, it's heavily dependent on trust to begin with, as you well know,
Yeah.
right? This is especially true when you're going to be engaged in a long-lived relationship, right? Either with a financial planner, right?
Right.
Or in this case, a GP LP relationship, right? Investing in a private equity fund because it's sort of a minimum of a decade, right? So yeah, there's a high level of trust that has to be built up over time. So large institutions spend a disordinate amount of time analyzing the general partners, these private equity fund managers, not only their past successes and failures, but also personal backgrounds, their histories. So there's a significant operational infrastructure that institutions either have in-house or they outsource to a company like my old firm, Cambridge Associates. That's what we used to do for pensions and endowments on the hedge fund side. So my job would be to do due diligence on all the hedge fund managers I thought were appropriate for those particular portfolios. We would do the same thing also on the private equity side. Right, so a pretty large infrastructure to build up that trust, and then which is obviously not something a retail investor can pull off.
Sure. Yeah, and so I guess that leads to it would be really difficult how difficult is it for a new private equity firm to sprout up, right? Because you kind of need some track record, right?
For sure.
You can't just hang your shingle and say, hey, we do private equity now, right?
Indeed, it is rather challenging. And this is true launching any kind of fund. If you're launching your own mutual fund or a hedge fund or private equity fund, it really comes down to the pedigree, which gets into some of my research about, where do fund managers come from, right? If you come through sort of the approved channels, as it were, right? You were trained at the right investment banks and you had the right education and you've been doing this for 10, 20 years, it's a much easier sell in terms of trust and conveying competence to the market, and therefore raising assets to a fund, than it would be, say, if, I just started a fund willy-nilly out of my garage, right?
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Same way you build trust in any employment market, right?
Oh,
Like you got
absolutely.
to
Right.
convey that you're worthy.
Sure.
The opinions and statements presented on this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Never make any investment or financial decisions based on information offered on this show without first consulting your financial, legal, or tax advisor. All economic and performance information mentioned on the show is historical in nature and is not indicative of any future results. All indices mentioned on this show are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Lastly, all opinions expressed by Jason Cutitta and any guests on the show are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of or are endorsed by ToBA Financial. For Jason Cutitta, investment advisory services are offered through ToBA Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Hawaii and in other jurisdictions where exempt from registration.